be as interactive as possible. Allow me to share my screen. Then just let me know once you can see my screen. You see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So the topic for today is data privacy in the workspace, strategies to counter social engineering. I will begin with a brief background from my experience, what we are seeing in the industry, and what is transpiring across organizations. You will find that social engineering is happening in every space of our livelihoods, whether it is personal, whether it is at the workspace. The only difference is at the workspace is employees tend to offload their responsibility in trusting that the bank or the organization or the institution is already covered. And you'll find that teams that are tasked with defending against social engineering, they have the responsibility, but accountability lies across the entire organization. Accountability meaning me as a staff, what is my role in preventing these attacks and from happening? But when an attack does happen, usually it's the teams that are tasked with defense, who in this case could be IT security, or if there's a data breach, you'll find us as the DPOs, we are tasked with starting with answering questions of how did it happen, or what could we have done to prevent it. But if you go to the root cause of how it came about, if you're able to effectively investigate this, you can find credentials were shared. Um, Someone clicked a link they're not supposed to click, and really there's no control for human error. So what we have to do? What do we do as DPOs, but also as the teams that are entrusted to secure our customer data and our employee data, is to see what controls can we put in place, what strategies are there can we put in place to counter these attacks, what can we do that supports our programs for data protection, because as the act says, we have to put in place the necessary measures that help prevent a data breach. And data breaches can be either through digital mediums or physical. So this, I will go straight, I will not go, I'll go straight to the introduction. And as Anita had mentioned before, organizations are increasingly relying on digital systems. We have seen a shift. There used to be days where you have to line up at Umeme station to pay your water. I mean, to pay your electricity bill. And the same thing was for national water. But now you're doing it on your mobile device. So as the quality of life is being improved by digital, so do the cyber risks increase exponentially. And it's often said that security catches up with the attackers, or the hackers in this case. So you've ideally, there's a breach, and then we come back and say, how did it happen? Let's put a gap for that. It's not often that security is ahead of the new breaches. Usually we play in catch up, and with the staff and the employees who are at the front line of this defense and of every program, it's imperative that we have to have this social engineering training, because they are the ones that are being targeted. So the Act requires that organizations safeguard personal data and comply with the standards to enhance security and reduce risks of social engineering. And this webinar ideally is to help us understand what is social engineering, what tools can we use to mitigate this, and how do we ensure compliance with the Act. I'll not go straight, I'll just brief over this. Some things maybe not mentioned. I'm a GLG Research Group Council member. GLG is a research group that across the globe that does research in different areas of technology and also other areas. My specialty there is in technology, whether it's digital transformation or cybersecurity. I'm also a UBA cybersecurity committee member, and at Postbank, I'm also the board chair for the staff circle. My digits are there in case someone wants to reach out on WhatsApp or email. They are available there. And ideally, so in a brief, social engineering, we hear so many things of what it could be. But in brief, in summary, social engineering attacks manipulate individuals in revealing confidential information and performing actions to compromise security. This can be, as an organization, you're putting in place controls to safeguard your customer and employee data. But the customers themselves can be the ones that lead to a breach. Being in a bank, we see a lot of instances there where you shared your PIN. There's a case prior to joining banking, I was also in consulting, and there would be cases that we are investigating where the customer is complaining that my money has been taken. But when you investigate further, you find that this staff gave out their credentials to a number that seemed to be contact center. And when you engage further, when you engage the customer further, you find out that they got someone shared with it on WhatsApp. We are all in, everyone, I assume here, has a WhatsApp group. You receive a link that says win a ticket. Now we are in the festive period. You'll see links coming through that win a ticket to Dubai from Emirates. But due to curiosity, we often tend to click these links and we don't know who is at the end of that link. WhatsApp has implemented some controls where something has been forwarded multiple times. It will have a flag there that shows it has been forwarded multiple times. But still, in a group of 100 or 20 or so people, curiosity takes the better of our staff. So of the people who are receiving these links. So, and this comes down to the second point, that you need to drive the point home for individual vigilance, because it plays a crucial role in preventing breaches of social engineering. Right now, we're on this webinar, but are we certain that the employees we have, that we are entrusted with, whose data we are protecting, are doing the right thing? As across the organization, regardless of the size, are we sure that everyone is doing the right thing in driving home their individual vigilance? Because this social engineering is an attack on an individual or a group of individuals. So if those individuals are not vigilant enough, it can lead to a breach of data, a breach of confidentiality, a breach of availability due to the lack of vigilance. And like I mentioned, you find that there's times when we have talks with staff, when I'm doing security awareness trainings, and you'll ask, did everyone leave their home when the door is locked? Everyone say yes. You'll ask, does everyone have a password on their phone? Some say yes, some, okay, most say yes, some say no. When you ask, why don't you have a password? I have nothing to hide. However, of recent, I've been contacted by different individuals that there's this thing going around of taking over WhatsApp. So either you'll go on a public Wi-Fi, or for whatever reason, and you know what is interesting is when you interrogate the person whose WhatsApp has been taken over, they are not very forthcoming with the information of maybe someone sent me a link, I clicked it, or someone asked for the PIN, I sent it. That information, when the incident has happened, is the individuals are usually not forthcoming, because it's at that point that someone realizes the mistake they made, but it's already too late. You've already given it out. There's one that at least last week that I was contacted through. It's a high-profile individual. Their WhatsApp was taken over, and the fraudsters are using the person's WhatsApp to contact the people in his contact list to send money. And unfortunately, some have already sent money. So to go back to tell everyone, please don't send money and the like. Some, because of this, a high-profile individual and is trusted, you feel like, okay, if he's asking me for money, it must be serious. They are sending this money. So you find that the mentality of me not having a password on my phone because I have nothing to hide, you will you have contacts, you have people's contacts that are on your phone. Their personal, what you would call their personal data. So what's your responsibility in protecting the data of your contacts? So this individual vigilance plays a key role in ensuring that, one, they are aware there that we, us as at the front line, we are safe, and two, in case an incident happens, it's reported on time and we can be able to respond in time. But so that's really it that helps provide this vigilance. We need to drive this vigilance home to the people that we are entrusted in protecting. This is both staff, customers. Let's drive this individual vigilance home. And what are the common types of social engineering attacks that are usually the ones that we see that affect organizations? Phishing. These are mass emails. I'm sure someone on the call has received mails of the Nigerian prince who is stuck. He wants to move his money, and you've seen that there are also those of spear phishing. Now, spear phishing is a bit more targeted. I know the individual. For example, I've shared my email on this webinar. So someone who watches this recording can say, okay, let me send Stephen mail asking him for ABCDEFG. And another example, in organizations, what we need to be very vigilant on is HR. So HR sends out a job advert and people are applying. So the person who applies for a job is sending an attachment, but HR needs to be vigilant in watching out for these attachments that have come through. First of all, as an organization, do you have the technical controls in place that, let's say, this is a machine that HR can download these CVs from? That machine is protected and the necessary controls are in place that in case there's an attachment which is malicious, we can be able to identify and mitigate it there. Have we trained HR to watch out for social engineering attacks? Because they are one of the most HR, finance, because they are receiving invoices. HR is receiving CVs. And this can be targeted that I know the HR, I know the link, because your job adverts will really have send mail at HR that this or whatever, or the email. Sometimes you even find the email of the director to send mail to. So I obtain this information. How can I use it to target? This is where spear phishing comes in effect. These individuals that are behind those public communications, how trained and how aware are they on these social engineering attacks? Then we have a phishing. Phishing, ideally, I'm sure this is usually through phone, and some of us on the webinar may have received these calls of saying you have won money. Send me some money, we get this money back. So this ideally phishing, it can be directly asking you to send money, but it can also be, as I'll show in a small video towards the end, of someone pretending to be an employee of the bank or of the organization. So I keep using bank because I work in a bank, but someone can be pretend to be an employee, and that employee can decide to can pretend that I'm trying to visit a link, I'm trying to download an attachment, but I can't download it. Help me, call IT. You will call IT in, help me be able to get this attachment. And this link that the IT person will click, because they understand you know them, most likely, because someone who is going to do a phishing, other than the telco attacks where you just call in and say you have won money, it can also be phishing, which is targeted to individuals. You call their phone, say, I'm stuck in such and such area, I need to access a website, can you help me access? I'm going to make a presentation, and the URL is shared, but that URL may be malicious. So how it's delivered, it can be delivered via WhatsApp. Almost every support team has a WhatsApp channel. It's dropped there. Our people who are doing support very aware of these type of attacks. Can they validate who the person is at the end of the phone before they do the action? The other is baiting. This is ideal offering free items to lure victims. And this can be even we've seen it in the instances where you'd have many people being kidnapped. Someone says, "Come here, and we have a job for you." A person arrives because you're excited about the thing. You don't do your due diligence. You reach there, and next thing we know, you're a missing person. So baiting can also happen for for USB drives. I come to a lobby of your organization and leave a USB drive there. So someone who is curious about this USB drive may pick it up, put it in a PC to see what's on this USB drive, because it all plays on the psychology of curiosity. Put it in the PC to say, what is this? What is on this drive? Who is it for? It's even worse when the USB drive seems juicy, what I would call juicy. If it is in a big storage, 64 GB, 32 GB, someone may think, I've got 32 GB flash. Put it in the PC, and by connecting it to the PC, you've granted access through things like there are ways you can program a USB drive to act as a keyboard. So it is recognized as a keyboard. Even your controls that are in place to watch out for USB drives. There's a tool called a physical tool called USB Rubber Ducky. I'll probably paste it in the chat later. This USB drive operates as a keyboard and can be pre-programmed to type commands. Immediately it's connected to a USB port. So your endpoint security, which is watching out for USB drives, doesn't see it as a USB drive. It sees it as a keyboard and doesn't block it. So the controls we have, are they effective to prevent such a thing from happening? Is something that we need to review, because remember, there's no control for human psychology. Our employees, guaranteed, one way or another, are going to be victims. But how can we be able to identify and respond before it causes harm to the organization? Pretexting, this is someone pretending to need information. I'm trying to do an assignment, but my job role doesn't really have that information. That doesn't require that information, but I'm pretending to be someone who needs it. So I will ask the person who has it, like, hey, I need this information, share it with me. This can be internal between an organization. If you're dealing with an insider threat within the organization, this is ideally someone who is deliberately malicious. They want to pick information that they are not supposed to be privy to, and I ask for a copy of it, but to complete a task. And it can also be maybe you're dealing with third parties, a third party, and is asking for, and the third party staff is malicious and they're asking for information that they don't need, but someone they have befriended you. And usually you'll find that before social engineering deals on the premise of trust. So someone builds trust with you before they can be able to carry out some of these attacks, especially things like baiting and pretexting and impersonation. They build trust. After the trust has been built, then the attack is carried out. In banking, we see it when you have customers who keep depositing. They are known to the branch. They do everything to the book. Everyone knows them. One day, and it could be leading up towards coming to deposit fake notes. So once they start noticing that you do not check their currencies as stringent as you did in the first case, someone slips in fake notes and you deposit them, and that can cause a loss to the bank. Impersonation, this is ideally mimicking authority to gain trust. There's an interesting incident that I saw one time of someone was on a Zoom call, similar to what may have here. I was on a Zoom call with what seemed to be the CFO and the ED and the MD, and they gave instructions to clear a payment to this individual. But everyone on the Zoom call was controlled by a fraudster using deep fakes. So the instruction was given, seemed like on a call we have spoken, but all the people on the call were deep fakes. And the individual ended up clearing a payment. Later on, it was discovered that the people who she thought she was on the call with were not actually the people who were not the true people of the organization. So this comes to impersonation. Someone will say, I work at this place. I'm your vendor. Please avail me, give me access to your premises. We need to fix an AC. You see it in movies, but this is also something that is done in practice. And let me just move this away. Sorry, at this point, do we have any questions? I could maybe take any questions at this point. Are there any in the chat?
We haven't received any yet, so let's go ahead for now.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So we have some examples of attacks, social engineering attacks that have come, that ideally you'd seem, you see, it may seem that everyone is, these cases that are here, you'd think that the program is effective, it's working as it should, and these can't be breached. However, if you see some of the examples that we've shared before, the type of attacks, case number one is the one of Twitter. And this information picked, the links are shared there. They could also be shared as part of the presentation. Using phishing and social engineering targeted employees of Twitter to gain access to the platform's internal tools. The attackers hijacked prominent accounts, including those of Barack Obama and Elon Musk, to promote cryptocurrency scam, netting over $100,000. So someone would sit there and say, but how would Twitter employees be culpable to such phishing attacks to gain access to internal tools? But these are dealing, like mentioned, social engineering is dealing on human psychology. You may not be sure that day the employee who came in place came with some mental baggage, that they didn't do their due diligence. Or you have been doing a job and the job seems routine. So even when you started the job, how it started out, when you're very vigilant, you lose that vigilance because it's now routine, and some things go under the cracks without realizing it. And no, Sky Mavis, there was a heist of social engineering of employee credentials to access critical systems. They withdrew large sums of amounts of cryptocurrency, and it was one of the biggest blockchain, one of the largest in the blockchain gaming sector. There's one which is quite interesting of Google and Facebook, where this Lithuanian national, Evaldas, they created a fictitious company and started sending invoices to Google and Facebook. These invoices were for transfer of money, and for about 2 years, Google was paying and Facebook were paying this fictitious company without realizing it. So the question comes to beg that, how could we have identified this? How could we have mitigated this? What due diligence would we be doing within our organizations to prevent such a thing from happening? Because this is not, and this one of Google and Facebook is not a one-time incident. It's a period of 2 years they were paying a fictitious company that was sending out it was a fake company sending out invoices. Another one is OCBC Bank in Singapore, where it was a phishing attack. They sent an SMS to bank customers, leading them to fake websites to steal account details. And this, we see it even locally, of our customers receiving links either for contact center or for especially SMSs for contact center, that you can reach us on this number, and you'll find that someone has given out all their details that enable a hacker or a fraudster to reset their accounts. Because when you're going to do say a PIN reset, they're going to ask you for details, and what's the last transaction you did, when do you open the account, what's your date of birth, national ID, things like that. So the attacker pretends to be customer service, and You're giving them all this information and they're just in the middle sending it to contact center as they're being queried. They reset your account, move money, and in the customers think they're dealing with the contact center. So when you engage them and find out where do you get this number from, they are not very clear because they at that point in time they realize their mistake. So this showcase our employees themselves being culpable, but also our customers being culpable. How do we transfer what I mentioned earlier, the vigilance, the individual vigilance to both employees and customers to make them aware that, hey, you play a role in preventing such frauds from happening. So one of the ways most common is what I call business email compromise. Most common, you receive them via mail. One of the most common attacks is phishing. And ideally, one of the things we will try to train our employees on is to be vigilant. Watch out for the email address that is sending the mail. Watch out for the attachments. Are you expecting such an attachment from this individual? Usually, there's either a threat of, let's say you're going to lose access to your account. This is a message from IT. Please click this link to reactivate. Things like that. Because you might find someone who is trying to hit a deadline. And when they receive this mail that by end of the day, your account is going to be deactivated, they want to keep access. Even that point of doing due diligence doesn't register in their heads. So you'll find even what telltale signs, usually the sign off is generic as such, but also when you do your phishing test, like we'll see later on how we can be able to combat this. When you do your phishing tests, what are you checking out for with your employees? Can you make them a bit more targeted? For example, if I'm doing a test against finance, can it be more targeted to what finance might pass as legitimate? Let me not just do generic tests across the organization. And what would be the strategies ideally to prevent phishing attacks from because they are social engineering attacks, they're going to come, guaranteed, but what can we do to prevent them from causing harm to the organization? We need to implement and communicate clear security policies and highlighting acceptable use and social media guidelines. You'll find that via email, we are professional. But on the same computer, I'm accessing WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And via those various channels, I have WhatsApp web. I'm attaching things which I'm clicking links that are coming through WhatsApp web. The WhatsApp is on my PC of the bank, of the organization. And when I click that link, it's compromising the organization-owned machine. So what policies do you have around social media use at your organizations? Because many of these attacks, if they're not through office mail, they're through personal communication channels. What controls do you have in place? What policies do you have? What mechanisms do we have in place to actually monitor implementation and execution of these policies? Because there's one thing to have a policy, it's another thing to enforce and monitor enforcement. The data protection and privacy, the DPI has controls that we have to put in place to the guidelines. Say we have updated our policies to align with those guidelines. What strategies do we have in place to ensure compliance? Or are we waiting for a breach to go back and say, okay, this was not working, maybe we need to update it? So we need to implement the policies. We need to communicate, because you don't want a case where someone says, okay, I didn't know. This was not communicated to me. How do we communicate these policies? We need to have an acceptable use policy, because it's common practice. Organization-owned computers are being utilized for personal business. One time we put in place a DLP policy, and you find that the policy is flagging a lot of hits of personal data. But when you realize the hits, it's actually people applying for jobs. And what is being flagged as personal data is a CV that is being sent to a non-organization owned email. So our staff are using these machines for both personal and you accessing LinkedIn. You'll find that even you have employees who are using your email, your organizational email, to sign up to sites that ideally are not, have nothing, no relation to the work that they are doing. So you'll find an organizational email on LinkedIn. So when that website is breached, even that organizational email is breached. I mean, is obtained, sorry. But because our employees want easy things, you can find that even the password that was used to sign up to that site is the password they're using for their email. Or they have just changed with a number at the end, where it was 2 on the one they're using for the organization, the other side they have changed it to 3. If in their minds they have been vigilant. So what mechanisms do we have in place to prevent, to one, implement our policies, 2, monitor compliance, and also 3, have mechanisms for addressing exceptions, for addressing incidents that are due to policy breach. And one of the things that I've seen works is the last option, is that if there's a policy breach, what are we doing about it? Can we have a mechanism that ideally can show that, oh, this thing is actually serious, I'm not supposed to do this? What do we have in our organizations to address a policy breach? Because if you don't address it at that point where it would have led to the data breach eventually, if you don't address the practice early enough, that practice can lead to a data breach for the organization. And the next thing you know, it's public now. Your data that you are protecting is now public. So we need to be able to address these, what we would call malpractices, early in the chain, before reaching a point where it has caused, it has actually led to a public data breach. The awareness we are doing, are we doing targeted awareness based on roles? Because we tend to end up doing general awareness, general staff awareness, but are we doing awareness based on roles? Case I had mentioned earlier, if I'm doing awareness for finance, if I'm doing awareness for HR, it can't be the same, because finance probably is receiving different types of documents that they need to be more vigilant on. A case in point is, you see the URA Excel sheets have macros enabled, but they are known attacks through macros in documents. Now, how do we do awareness for finance to watch out for malicious macros, or to watch out that they are getting macros from they're getting these documents from legitimate sources? How do we train HR to have an eye for job applications? What could seem malicious? What is legitimate application? So we can't just do blanket training. No, it has to be, yes, we'll do general awareness, but we need to go down and also do targeted trainings for the teams that we have around social engineering attacks, what to watch out for, how to report, and if they have reported, what to do. Because if I've by mistake clicked a link, what should I do as someone who has clicked a link if it is malicious? So these trainings can't just be on a general. They need to be targeted. Thirdly, are we doing, beyond training, are we doing tests ourselves to assess how effective, first of all, how effective our training is, but secondly, how exposed are we across our staff? There are tools that are put there, KnowBe4, which is a paid tool for security awareness training, but also it does it helps in phishing tests. But there's also an open source tool called GoFish. GoFish can actually be set up you can just Google GoFish, you'll find the link, can be set up to do phishing tests across your organization, similar to KnowBe4. You want to be able to see that, okay, of my staff 100 or so, how many just click links? And I'm going to do it over a period of time, not at one time. I'm going to do it over a period of time, and I'm going to watch out throughout the year who have been those repeat offenders that every phishing test we send, they are failing it. Maybe there's something we need to do with this individual. Maybe we need to reduce their level of access before we do what? And ensure that they can be able to really identify these alerts and not be victims. But also, we want to see our ExCo members, executive committee, because it's assumed that if you are going by the phishing attacks, I mean the social media attacks, social engineering attacks, a compromise of the MD's account can actually cause a much far-reaching issue, because that account can be used to send mail to partners, can be used to send mail to staff, can be used to send mail to where, and can lead. The higher the role, the more aware they need to be on what? On these social engineering attacks. So what tests can we do against our staff? What insights can we pick from there? How do we pick those insights to fine-tune our training, also to fine-tune our controls? Because if there's been a breach due to certain links we want to see that, okay, can these phishing links bypass our filters? Let's say we are watching out for spam. But when we do a phishing test, all this just pass through our spam filter and they hit the inbox of our staff. So maybe our spam filter needs to be fine-tuned to watch out for such links which would seem legitimate, but they're actually malicious. So these actual tests help us fine-tune our controls, but also help us know the exposure we have against our employees. Thirdly, and really the goal for these phishing tests is not for people to fail. There's one thing that you can do a test and you're just doing name and shame, that you failed your test, you failed the test. No. Target your campaigns around identification and reporting. Try and encourage more people to identify phishing links and reporting them than looking out for people who have failed. Let's not be, the TAP program encourage identification and reporting. Why should it encourage identification and reporting? It is because attacks are going to keep on happening. So knowing the fact that attacks are going to keep on happening, let's encourage identification and reporting. Not who has not clicked, who clicked. Yes, as we identify, as we raise awareness around identification, even the people who clicked will be more aware to identify these issues. Let's not be the ones who are just saying that our program shouldn't be around who clicked and who didn't click. It should be around who was able to identify, who was able to report. Maybe I know sometime we're doing an induction for new graduate trainees, and we asked them, how can we make our security program better? And some of them recommended rewards and recognition. So they asked, the question after that was, how would you reward or recognize someone for doing what they're supposed to be doing to identify and report incidents? So the best case we came up with was, okay, let's recognize the staff who ideally, every time a test goes, they are first to identify, or they have not fallen victim. They are the ones who identify and report. So we won't reward them, but we recognize them for their vigilance. And it goes a long way in recognition when you recognize the what you would call the champions of identification and reporting. We need to identify, like goes into the next point of identify. Ensure that employees can identify before sharing sensitive information, and also enforce data classification. We have policies, but how can we enforce that every document within our organization is labeled? What is for public? consumption is labeled public. What is for internal use is labeled internal. What is for restricted use, restricted ideally would be we are within an organization, but not everyone in the organization should receive this document. It should be for eyes only, let's say. So how do we classify those documents? What tools can we put in place to support us in classification of these documents, so that if a document is labeled internal and say it so finds its way in a public forum, it's encrypted. Someone who is not Microsoft Office 365 has a good tool that does that. Also, there are some like Forcepoint that have a data loss prevention solution that can help with that. But what can we do to effectively classify our documents that in case there's a breach, they are not in plain text? And also secure. Secure being enforced multi-factor. Let multi-factor authentication be a standard across your organization. Because if I've given out my credentials, I need the token to be able to log in. So say the employee has dropped the ball, they have submitted their credentials, they realize later on that, oh, I submitted, and they have actually reported to you. And you take the corrective actions to reset their credentials. At least you know you have a window in which you can take corrective action, because a token was necessary to proceed with the login or utilizing that account that the credentials have been stolen. So let's ensure that we can enforce multi-factor, because one of the most critical, one of the targeted access levels for social engineering is the idea to steal credentials. And stolen credentials are one of the leading factors for breaches across organizations. So can we put in place multi-factor? This multi-factor also deals with the issue of the bad practice of password sharing within organizations. I shared with you my password, I'm not there. The time I'm not there is when you use my credentials, which I've never changed, which I didn't change the time after I shared them with you. I use them to carry out fraud. So this multi-factor helps with also curb such a practice of password sharing within organizations. Then implement easy reporting mechanisms. You want it to be easy for someone to report a phishing mail or an incident. KnowBe4 has a good tool called Phish Alert. It's embedded within your email accounts that someone can, when you open a mail, you just click the Phish Alert and it reports it to the either IT security or whoever you have set aside to receive those alerts. So let's make it easy to report, and we promote incident identification. Make your incident management, the reporting easy. Don't ask for so many details. What did you do? Where did you do it? Ask those when you're investigating, but make reporting easy so that someone can easily report and you follow up with the investigation. And lastly, when you investigate, provide feedback. Don't investigate, come up, maybe you have a conclusion and keep quiet. Because what that will do is that people will keep reporting, they see no feedback coming for what they have reported, and they'll stop reporting. So when you investigate, provide timely feedback to the person who has reported the incident that yes, we have checked it out, and yes, it was malicious, or it was not, or it was what. Give them feedback. And even in that feedback you're giving them of the investigation, you're also giving them kudos. Tell them, thank you for reporting this thing. Now we have investigated. This is what has transpired. Someone knows that when I report, actions are actually being done. People are actually investigating. But if I keep reporting, yes, you're doing investigation and you keep quiet. At some point, I'm going to say, why am I even reporting? No one ever gets back to me when I report. Let's ensure we provide timely feedback. And the key takeaways is from this awareness, create awareness, recognize threats and understand attacker tactics, create awareness across our staff, implement proactive measures. We talked about the policies, we talked about classification of documents, we talked about multi-factor. Ensure that you have some proactive controls in place, because you can't assume that all our staff will never drop the ball. It will happen. So what measures do we have in place that when that happens, we have a window in which we can respond? And then compliance, follow the regulatory requirements, but also compliance with your own internal policies. The assumption is your policies are built on the regulatory requirements and also other standards. So follow up compliance with those policies. Don't have a policy that is good on paper but lacks in execution. follow up on compliance. You will be able to curb incidents that would have ideally come through while policy violations, but it was a practice that everyone knew as much as the policy was there, and no one was ensuring that the policy is not being violated, and even the corrective actions are taken when they are violated. And yeah, this would bring us, I see we have about 10 or so minutes to bring to the point. If there are any Q&As, I would take it here. If there are any tools I need to clarify or any procedures, any pointers from my presentation so far, I could open it up for a Q&A right now.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephen. But we can all agree that the presentation was very, very informative. There are a couple of questions. I picked some from the chat as well as the Q&A. We are going to start with the questions in the Q&A panel. Do you mind if I give you about 3 questions?
Yes, you can. Let me just
can you
share
take
in
3
my
at
screen
a
so I
go?
can write them.
3 at a go, or would you like to take 1 at a go?
No, I can take 3 at a go.
Okay. Now, for the first question on the best security measure a company can use to prevent social engineering attacks, for this, I want to believe you have been answered because this was emphasized even in the recap. Now, the first question I'm going to give you is how often should users be trained on physical access control? Now, the second question is, how do you deal with BYOD, bring your own device?
Okay.
And then the third question, do we have cases of litigations regarding social engineering attacks in Uganda? You could take those and then we'll add later.
Okay. Okay, like I mentioned, how do you prevent social engineering? I mentioned that. How often should they be trained on physical access control? I think this comes down to how large the organization is and how often you're doing online trainings. I believe every half year should be adequate, because in 6 months, you may have gotten new people, but also it's also a period of time that some could have forgotten what was trained in earlier. So I would say every half year, carry out a training, because I've seen it even being done for emergency protocols for fire, where you want to train, you want to assess how are people responding when there's a fire incident. Can they run? Where do they collect from? So you can do the same for physical access control. Train them every half year, but also don't wait for the actual physical training. Send out awareness tips, at least on a monthly basis, to keep whatever has been trained in the minds of the people who have been trained. Send out awareness tips via mail. Though there's a poor practice, it's often said that 30% of employees read mail, which is not addressed to them. But it's something that you can do. The other thing I've seen, which is also effective, is update the screensaver. When you do a training, update the screensaver for the organization to have highlights of what you trained about. So every time someone logs in, they should be able to see something like about the training that you had. Have some banner that you can update to have it front and center with them. Another option would be to have placards. Have some placards or some stickers or stickers that you can put within the organization, so that every time I come in the office, I can be able to see, hey, prevent this from happening. It's your responsibility. I would say those areas can help, even if you did physical training once a year, but you have other methods you can deliver your content. Use those other methods and do the physical training. Bring your own device. I would say one of the most important controls you can do for bring your own device is posturing. Network before you grant a device access to our network, can we be able to identify this device so that we are avoiding a rogue device from connecting to our network? So if you have a policy of bring your own device, what are you going to install or put on this machine that can be able to validate that this is a machine that we know, it's not a rogue device, and we are aware of it. One way is network access control. What network access control will do for you, and it's a step above network access control. It's network access control, but also posturing. Posturing means that once you connect your cable, before that access is granted, let me check that machine first. So you can be able to say, okay, every device that is not owned by the organization, give it a guest portal. And in that guest portal, when we grant you access through a guest portal, you can only access particular resources. The network is configured to allow you to access particular resources, not everything on the network. So I would say come up with areas that are low risk that they can access. If someone was just accessing internet, it's a different story, but they shouldn't be able to access your servers and other critical assets if they are not using a an organization-owned machine. In terms of litigation for social engineering, what you would find is there's none that I'm aware of, but social engineering is an entry into the organization. And because it's an entry into the organization, the actual incident might be either theft of money or loss of data. You'll find that if there's a litigation, it's not actually on the entry. The litigation is on the incident of theft or loss of money. That's what I've seen. Usually, even the ones where they are hackers and the like, you find that the litigation is on the incident. Either someone facilitated insider or there was a breach, but to be able to clearly identify that the breach was due to social engineering, because how do you identify that someone gave out their credentials or they were stolen? It becomes a I said, he said, she said. So I've not seen any which have clearly come out to spell that yes, someone is being litigated because of the facilitated entry due to them being compromised through social engineering. I've not seen that, at least in Uganda. Even when you see the cases that are international, this litigation due to social engineering being a compromise through social engineering, you're not seeing those clearly coming out. Maybe I could hope I've been able to answer the previous questions. We could take others. I see some hands are up.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I don't think we'll be able to take the hands that are up because we still have a couple of questions in the chat, and yet we have about 4 minutes to go. So I'll pick 3 other questions. Someone says digital safety is about paying attention and awareness of what is happening around you, both digital and physical. Now, knowing that people are multitasking, working different jobs and using social media, what is your advice on this issue? The second question, someone asks, how do you identify a breach of a policy? Then question 3, what are the effective ways to identify emails sent through online fake mailers that may appear genuine to recipients? And now, Stephen, maybe before you come in, earlier when you were sharing on how often users should be trained, someone called James Philip shared a tip in the chat. You could maybe comment on that as well. He says, great presentation. One of the ways it's done in my company is through compulsory quarterly online training, which ends in a 10-question quiz, which one must pass. Failure to do this eventually leads to your active profile being disabled by ICT. Over to you.
Okay, thank you for that submission. I will go to the first question of digital safety. Working different jobs using, what's the advice on this issue? People are definitely going to be multitasking, and they are going to be in and out of the office. What I would say we would start with is, what controls do we have in place that facilitate mobility? Because someone is both in and out of the office, they are doing different jobs, but knowing this in place, do we have controls that, one, if there's a breach on a device, can we be able to identify? I see the identification bit is the most overlooked part of security management, because you find that you wait until money has moved. Sometimes until data is leaked. That's when identification starts. No, the controls need to be updated that we can be able to identify a breach at source. This means, can we transfer our monitoring to the asset that is actually being used by these employees? Because if you're able to have effective monitoring of those assets, whether they're in the office, out of the office, because we are facilitating mobility, I need to see that asset and see if it's online, and my tools, which I have on premise, should be able to reach those assets. Let me identify at source that our teams who are at the back end doing monitoring, they can be able to respond. But also, even the teams that are tasked with identification and response, they need to be upskilled. We have a challenge of knowledge, whereby we are just seeing alerts. People are not very good at investigating. So we need to train even the teams tasked with with response, to be able to know how to effectively respond to incidents. I would say that one would help address that issue, because employees are going to drop the ball. Yes, they are multitasking and all, but whoever is monitoring needs to be able to monitor wherever that asset is. They also need to be able to effectively respond to incidents. The second, how do you identify a breach of policy? You have policy controls and you have policy statements. And the statement will say, don't do don't do this, do that. Quarterly or monthly, or create a dashboard. Actually, I would say, Linda, go and create a dashboard of your policy statements. Have a threshold at which you can be able to review compliance with those policy statements. When there's a breach, then also update your, if a policy says something, but you don't have the tools in place to help you monitor that, raise it with management that our policy statement says this, but we can't be able to monitor it, and this is the gap we have in our visibility. Put in place the right tools that help you monitor that policy control, and report effectively. Report as often as you can, either monthly, weekly, quarterly. At what we try and do on our side, we monitor weekly, but have an overall monthly report of compliance, of policy compliance and breaches throughout the month, so that when someone, if me, I have my staff who is always in breach, I have to have a discussion with that staff. But you have to have the tools that help you monitor compliance. Some policy controls are going to be physical, where you actually check, but some can be automated with tools. Then this one of what effective ways can we identify email sent through? There's a thing called SPF. SPF helps you it validates the email server that is sending out mail on your behalf. So put in place there's DKIM and SPF controls on your mail domain, so that any mail sent with your domain but is not signed, because that's SPF and DKIM help sign your email that is coming from your email servers. So any mail that is not signed, you receive a banner that shows that this mail, we can't validate the source of this mail. Also, secondly, is that you can put a text in front of every mail that is coming externally, so that if an mail is coming from a server that is not yours, but it has your email, the subject will be automatically appended external. So you can do that, so that anyone who receives it is reading external, but it's saying as if it's coming from internal. Train your staff around identifying such mails which have a appended external, but they seem to be coming internal from internal source.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephen, for responding to those questions. The presentation was really good. As you can see, we still have so many questions coming in, but I appreciate the fact that we've run out of time. I don't know how much time you have. Do you mind taking on about 2 more questions, maybe, before we close?
I do have time. I don't have time.
Okay. Right. Now, someone asked, how can deepfake technology be leveraged to conduct social engineering attacks on social media, and what measures can be taken to mitigate this risk?
Okay.
Another, okay.
Wait for the other.
Okay. Let me just do two of them. How often can an organization carry out vulnerability penetration tests? You can take those.
Okay. For deepfakes, actually, I mentioned in my presentation, you can research it. Some organizer, a lady who paid money to deepfakes, but this was for voice, deepfakes on a Zoom call. Now, we need to train our staff to call individuals to validate information. If I receive a mail or if I'm on a call with someone, after that call, can I get off that phone and call and say, we have just been on a call. Is it sure? Are you sure I should do this? Call the individual's phone. There might be deep fakes which are passed on social media. Train your staff not to watch for that unless it is coming from the organization's own social media handles, for example. Don't take a deep fake. Train them not to just read anything and take it as biblical truth on the internet. Let them go to the source. If it's a deep fake on a company and someone is saying we have announced a product, go to the company's website and find out where that, if there's a press release. Don't train them. It's really around training of staff to be vigilant. It's the control, what you would say about defects. Defects, you're going to have people who fake voices, who fake videos, but have the the employees know that they can go and do further due diligence after that has come in. How often you should do penetration tests? What I could say that every time. First of all, check your systems, your systems before they are going into production. Don't wait for a penetration test to do a check. Have your teams do internal checks. So for bugs, security vulnerabilities, for logical issues, which would lead to a breach before they are going to production. Start from there. For penetration test, you can do when you have had major changes within the environment, or I see new guidelines coming, at least from in our industry as the regulator, to do tests every year. But by regulation, we are regulated to do at least every 2 years. But there are new guidelines for cybersecurity that are coming through that are recommending every year, which you could do. It does if you can be able to find a firm that can do it periodically. My challenge I have with penetration tests is that most of the vendors, many of the vendors are just doing vulnerability scans. They're not actually doing what you'd call a penetration test. So you need to be mindful of who you're onboarding. Are they doing just running a tool and giving you a report, or are they actually going ahead and trying to test? Because you find even social media checks are not included in the scope of those penetration tests, which idea should be something that social engineering attacks should be something carried out as part of penetration test. But many vendors are just doing vulnerability scans. So do it annually, but make sure you check your systems before you take anything to production.
Okay, thank you so much. Allow me take the two last ones. There's someone who says he's been experiencing issues with GoFish. Maybe Stephen, you could reshare your contacts in the chat so that they reach out to you for guidance. Now, the next question is, I have phobia for open source software or tools. How reliable is GoFish, and how sure am I that they are not exfiltrating data from the organization? And then the last question, someone needs clarity really on whether there is a breach when a mail is opened or when they actually click on the link.
Okay. I would first respond to the phobia for open source. You know that a majority of tools that are used to do these penetration tests are actually open source softwares. And for GoFish, the difference between open source, go to their GitHub profiles. Open source, the advantage it has is that it's being viewed, the source code is being audited by a multitude of people. Go to an open source project that has support. You will see how often do they release updates, what are the bugs there, and the like. That's the advantage. Even Linux itself, Linux operating system is open source, but it's the one powering servers and what critical applications. So the advantage of open source is it is being audited by not only you, but a majority of multiple individuals, security researchers and the like. Now, it's even more stringent when it's a security tool that is open source. You'll have Metasploit, you'll have what? All those are being audited. So go to most of the open source softwares which are well maintained have a GitHub profile. Go there, see how often do they release updates. See the updates they are trying to release, what is trying to mitigate. It will give you comfort. But also don't do that. Just run it in a test environment where you can monitor data that is coming out of that test environment and see where is it going. Does the tool, when you install it, does it communicate anywhere else? Are you seeing any network communications outside to URLs or links that you're not sure of? Put it in a test environment and do some monitoring there so that you can be able to identify that as open source. I think the last question was email. When is an email breached when the email is opened or when the link? Usually it's not when it's opened, because I'm giving you a link so that you click it and you go to that link. It's usually when the link is clicked. Opening is not the issue, is carrying out actions. For example, if there's an attachment, I download it and open that attachment. You can't be breached by that opening. If there's a link and you click it and you go to a site, there's what is called drive-by downloads, that just by visiting a web page, you can get breached without even installing anything. So it's usually about the linking, the clicking of links and downloading and opening attachments that you should be wary about, not the opening of mail. Otherwise, you'll have staff who can't open any mail because they are afraid. It's the clicking links and downloading attachments from sources they're not even sure of. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephen, for that very informative presentation. Your insights were, of course, incredibly valuable, and we appreciate the time and effort that you put into today's presentation. Now, before I make further communication, I don't know, do you have any last remarks? Is there anything you'd like to highlight, maybe?
Mine is last remarks is we have finished the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but the controls and the policies and everything we do is living and breathing, right? So as much as we have closed the month, let's keep on being vigilant. We are in the festive period right now. You're going to see an increase in these types of attacks. You're going to see an increase. Staff are not very aware right now. Everyone is thinking of Christmas. So the level of awareness is going to drop, but the attacks increase. So the onus is on us to meet that gap in the reduction of awareness, but the increase in attacks. So let's be vigilant. I would say let's as an industry, we need to be collaborative. We need to share, compare notes, because what's working elsewhere someone shouldn't sit with that information. They can share it. Let's be collaborative, but also when the information is shared, let's protect the information that is shared. Let's not be the ones who are seeking counsel, and we are also the ones who are exposing the counsel that has been given. So let's share in confidence. Let's work in confidence, because cybersecurity and this digital era that we are in relies on collaboration. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I would like to take this opportunity to appreciate the participants for always making the time for these webinars. For those that have been asking for the recording and the presentation, this will be shared on the emails you used to register for this webinar. I shared a link in the chat. Kindly click on it and give us feedback. The feedback you give us helps us to improve on the quality of future webinars. Now, the communication I wanted to note is that the 2024 Data Protection Africa Summit will be held in Uganda this year from the 2nd to 5th December, as some of you may be aware. and the registration is still ongoing. Visit the website. It's dataprotectionafrica.org, dataprotectionafrica.org. I am going to type it in the chat. Please go to that website and register your participation. There is a discount for DPOs, so it would be better if you register in time. Thank you so much. If you require any more information about the summit, please send an email to info@pdpo.go.ug and we'll be able to reach out to you. Otherwise, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure having you today. Have a wonderful day and happy November.
I've shared my my email and
Oh yes,
and phone on WhatsApp. So I mean on chat, so anyone can reach out to me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Nice day.